9 competitive high school soccer players band together to navigate the wins, losses, and sacrifices of adolescence in Sarah DeLappe's Pulitzer Prize finalist play, The Wolves. This pack of players is ready and willing to defend their undefeated record and become warriors on and off the turf. Running September 23rd to the 26th at Theatre UCF, The Wolves is a reminder of the joys, the pain, and the vulnerability of youth, and reminds us that a teenager still lives inside of us all. Visit arts.cah.ucf.edu for more information.
Well, I'm Julia Listengarten. I'm professor of theater and artistic director of Theatre UCF. I'm excited that we're having our first Talkback in our season 2021-2022. And I'm going to pass this conversation on to Joni Newman.
Hello, everyone joining us right now and joining us later through the internet. We are grateful you're here. My name is Joni Newman. I am the co-dramaturgy coordinator this year at UCF. We want to thank you all so much for coming. We're so excited to have this conversation, and we want to thank our actors, our members of the creative team who've come to participate on this panel, as well as Theatre UCF's support of this event. We love to have talkbacks after performances because they give us the opportunity to connect our artists with their audience more directly than they normally get to. It gives us the opportunity to further explore the themes of our show. And I think that this is particularly interesting given the last handful of weeks in the youth sport industry, as conversations about the safety and the mental health of our youth athletes have come to light thanks to brave gymnasts like Simone Biles and Aly Raisman, Maggie Nichols, and Michaela Maroney, who recently addressed Congress. And then in a lighter note, personally, I'm excited because thanks to Ted Lasso, I am now completely obsessed with soccer. So this is going to be a fun day. We're going to begin our conversation by giving some time to our wonderful production dramaturg, Gian Ariano, to have some time to ask questions of our creative team and actors about the process they had in this show. And then afterwards, we'll open up this discussion to everybody to engage in dialogue about what we've experienced and learned as a part of this production. So Gian, the time is yours.
Thank you, Joni, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Julia, for putting this all together. So I just have a couple of questions, to inquire about your creative processes that have occurred throughout this entire production. And well, I want to say hats off to everybody. I saw the production Saturday and I thought it was wonderful. Shout out to David for directing, Sage for assistant directing, all the actors, stage managers, lighting designers, costume designers, scenic designers, the whole bunch. I really love seeing the process of everyone growing because I was there right from callbacks. But to the questions, to the meat and bones. So Sarah DeLappe inserts a quote by Gertrude Stein, a queer 19th and 20th century writer, into the playbook, and it is, "We are always the same age inside." Why do you think DeLappe inserted this quote, and how did it affect your creative process?
So I think she included the quote because one of her main goals of the show was to not idealize young women, not to put them as heroes or villains, and just to show them as they are. And so I think the show's a lot about representing teenage girls as they really are, and not presenting them in some different light, just kind of, this is what it's like to be a teenage girl. And I think there's a lot of maturity that comes with that, and a lot of confusion that comes with that. And in the show, we see soccer mom come in and has this whole monologue, and it's not super different than how we've been acting the whole show. So I think for me, at least, that just doubled down on the authenticity we're trying to bring to the show.
Yeah, what you spoke about with this being a very, Sarah DeLappe going into this not wanting to idealize what teenage girls go through, she wrote that in an interview that The Wolves was giving girls the space to own their own bodies and not be gifts to anybody else, not their parents or their boyfriends, but to themselves. But she also wrote that she incorporated a looming threat of men off stage waiting to exploit this fact that they are still blossoming their sexualities and learning how to wield it for themselves. And this can be seen by the rift that Dan and his friend caused between 7 and 14. So what impact did it have on you to be in this show with a primarily female cast?
So, honestly, it was absolutely amazing to be in an all-female cast. Like, the connection and just like with the young girls that we play, truly we've all been them. You know what I mean? Like different conglomerations of them, but like I don't know, connecting with so many other women in this industry. And I felt like it had such a positive atmosphere, like more so than probably any show that I had been in before. It's just really nice because, you know, a lot of shows over history depict women as mothers, sisters, girlfriends, wives. And so it was nice to just be girls and women and like be people, like truly. You know what I mean? I felt that the way that Sarah DeLappe wrote all of the young women in this, it's like it was honest and it was amazing to be able to be a part of it and work with such a like mostly female cast.
Yeah, I love seeing how with this focus on the female characters, we're able to see all these different type of relationships between all of them. Like some look up to others, some are friends with others, some have fallen apart with others. And I really think that variety in different relationships really adds nuance to the play. And like you all have said, it shows the realistic side of these characters. And how did it affect you all, I guess I could say, to have characters that are written to be very realistic and very contemporary?
That's my favorite part about the play is, well, during my first reading of this play a couple of years ago, that's the part that really grabbed onto me was, you know, like I was on a girls soccer team in high school, and reading this play, I felt like I was reading conversations that went on in that circle, you know, that this very suburban, contemporary take on these issues around the world, and kind of just how we throw around big words and big ideas. And you know, if you look back at the play, there's very little punctuation, there's very little there aren't many capital letters at the beginning of sentences. You know, it's very, you can tell by the way you read it how it flows and like how that conversation is just so natural. And like even during rehearsals when we were practicing soccer, we would have these conversations while we were stretching like our own conversations. And I kept looking at my castmates and being like, this sounds like the play. And you know, it sounded like the play because, you know, like Juniper just said, it's just so honest. It was a beautiful piece to work with.
I think it also took a lot of the pressure off of us as actors of like, we didn't need to try to be anything else. We could just, I feel like sometimes with especially female characters, you have to like put on like, oh, I'm prepper. Oh, I'm worthy of men's affection. And that's not what this show is about at all. We could just be ourselves, relax, not worry about really how we were delivering lines, except having the intention behind them of we could be ourselves, we could be comfortable to like adjust things or not look proper. And that was really refreshing as an actor to just be and not, it didn't feel like acting.
That sounds wonderful that you guys really felt heard in these roles and were able to slip into them easily because of the representation that DeLappe inserted into them. And on what you said, Emmitt, about when you guys would rehearse with your soccer drills, and speak about, what was going on in your day. I came into rehearsal to watch, and it was so uncanny how similar it was to the actual show. I was talking to Sage and Dave about it. But also on that note about the rehearsal processes that you all went through, this show includes a lot of overlapping dialogue. It includes physical drills, and some of those physical drills include soccer balls. What did you guys do to be so cohesive with one another?
I feel like we genuinely, the first couple weeks of rehearsal, I was going to say months, but the entirety was a month. And so it wasn't that. But the first couple weeks, we literally became a team. Like, I had never done any sports in high school or anything like that, like truly. And well, first off, we had 3 players that actually had played soccer, so that helped. But I feel like we just connected with each other. So then once we became cohesive with working with one another, the soccer kind of just became like second nature. You know what I mean? Once we put the work in to kind of learn the basics of how to kind of move and what kind of things were right and wrong, then we kind of just connected to one another, which I feel like made the acting process easier, which also just made the addition of soccer easier as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it most definitely does. This play, not only is it a kaleidoscope of these different female characters and the relationships they have with one another, but reading about DeLappe's inspiration and how she incorporated that into the play really elevated it for me in my respect for the show. And her inspiration was these wealthy New Yorkers in a museum, not really grasping these complex issues that they were presented with because they were too detached from a world that was outside their own, which is similar to the girls when they bring up things like the Khmer Rouge and the torture of Iraqi prisoners in Abu Ghraib. When they bring these up and they don't really understand the complexity of it, but nowadays a lot of young people are using their voice to speak on things such as gun rights, voting rights, and the Black Lives Matter movement, especially on social media. How important do you think it is for young people to be aware of the social movements around them and ones that may not be around them? And do you have any advice for young people hoping to be a part of these social movements?
You can go ahead, please. Ladies first. Sorry.
I'll just start with a little. I think it is so important that young people are a part of these movements because they are the next generation that will carry it forward. And ultimately, eventually, it will be their world and their society. And if we just shut them down, which I think does happen, it's like, well, we're older, we understand how the world works. When no matter what the age, you can get stuck in a mindset and stuck in your ways to a point where change can't happen. And so that's why I feel like we need the balance of having youthful voices and people who have been around longer and things like that, because I just feel like it's just vital to making sure that the world change that we need happens. So yes, I do believe that young people have to be involved.
I think something that really struck a chord with me was it really mirrors real life of like how much these girls did not know about these subjects, but we're still talking about it to have something to say. And I think with a lot of the movements that happened last year, we saw a lot of that of like, I think we all learned the term of like performative activism, of people that were just saying something because they felt like they had to. And I think that's really reflected in this play. But I do think it's incredibly important that, if you are speaking out, if you are becoming parts of these movements, to really educate yourself more than the characters in this play do, of reading one article for class and then talking about it just because it's a thing to talk about. But I agree with Juniper that it's essential to inform yourself and have a voice.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And also in the fact that, awareness is just the first step, you know, spontaneous movements, they're important. But what can we actually do to make that change? We can talk about being aware and being woke all we want. Um, and there comes a time where it is performative, and where it is more self-serving, you know. Um, but that awareness is essential. I think it's very important though to really look at what kind of progress we're making.
Yes, I definitely agree. When crafting this question, I thought a lot about my own experiences, and I try and push that everyone try and do a little something for causes they believe in. And I've had friends who don't know what they can do. Like, I'm just like one person. How can I help a social movement? But I always say, like Clarissa was saying, and like you were saying as well, Emmitt, that just becoming more aware and educating yourself on these movements is the first step into learning about what you can do. And at least you have that awareness then. But to this idea that these girls did live in this bubble that was detached from the rest of the world, I feel like that was also a bubble that showcased their innocence in their youth more so than DeLappe's original inspiration. And I think at the end of the play, this bubble popped because after 14's death. I feel like a layer of innocence was stripped from the rest of the girls on the team. And I think the bubble popping was exemplified by number 14's mom walking onto stage, as that had never happened before. A representation of how their world that was so sheltered is no longer so sheltered. So going forward, after this very serious event, what do you think will change about the girls' mindsets, if at all?
Go ahead, Clarissa. I saw you took a breath before.
I'm not sure if much is going to change. I think they're going to have a little more of life experience of I think it's going to bring them closer together, because certainly loss does have a way of bringing people together. But honestly, I think that as people, I'm not sure if it's going to change their conversations and the way that they live. I think personally, I can envision that, like, I'm talking about my character. I think my character is more accepted and part of the team now. But other than that, I think they're probably just going to go back to talking and socializing and connecting with each other, because that's what people do.
On the contrary, I think that they are going to be changed forever. I mean, I know that 00 is, and I'm personally just speaking from my personal experience with grief, like I think that something like that ages you, like ever since I lost someone like really close to me a couple of years ago, like I've felt like I've aged 20 years since then, and it's only been 3. So it's kind of like, wow. But yeah, no, I think that, there's definitely some kind of shift that happens, and it takes a while to grasp on to what that shift is, and the shift keeps happening and it keeps happening. But I think because grief is this, like, it's not even tangible. Like it is tangible, but you can't hold on to it because it doesn't have a shape to it. I think that, this is definitely like a milestone for them. I don't think they'll ever be the same. And by they, I mean 00.
I see reason in both of your standpoints. I think grief does come in all shapes and forms. And depending on someone like 00, who's not close to 14, may totally, I'm so sorry, someone who's 46 who had a completely different, not very close relationship with number 14 would probably have much different response than someone like 00 who had prior history with these characters. Okay. So I'll ask one more final question before opening up more conversations for others. I would say, after this production of The Wolves, do any of you plan on continuing soccer?
For me personally, I've played soccer all my life, and I was actually thinking about joining a rec team. because I thought that'd be really, really fun to do, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
I'll probably kick a ball around with my dad a bit more because he had some soccer experience before I got cast in the show, and so I'm sure that would make him really, really thrilled.
I'm playing right now.
I don't know if I would play soccer for the sake that I don't know if a team would allow me on their team, but I might do it like for fun with some friends.
That's wonderful. Gian, thank you so much for these excellent questions. I'm so glad that all of you were changed by your participation in this show, not just as actors, but as athletes, I guess, now as well. Let's open up the conversation to others that are here. We don't have too many. Normally, I would have questions just submitted to the chat. But since we have so few people, I think we're probably okay having you voice your own question if you would like as well. So if those of you who are here who are not part of the creative team or the cast, you're welcome to throw questions in the chat that we can ask them. Or if you have questions that you would like to voice that you want to be seen on, that's okay as well.
Hi guys, I just saw the show at 2 and I loved it. It was amazing. So I, from my life experience, really thought that it was great that everyone was wearing masks and it was just part of life, because it is right now. So I would like to know y'all's thoughts on that aspect of, you know, needing to wear a mask, and did y'all have a conversation about that? Or I had no problem. Of course, I was in the front seat, but I was like in the first row. But even if I was in the last row, I know I would have been able to hear you guys. So I was wondering if y'all had any thoughts, or how, if there was a process coming, like if you had conversations regarding the mask wearing and thoughts about that.
I mean, I can say we definitely had a conversation about it in rehearsal, because the school's policy is that we can't require anyone to wear masks, but we can have a conversation as a cast and make the masks part of the costume. And I think just because everyone was at such different levels, positions where they were coming from in the summer, everyone had a different relationship with COVID and with wearing masks and what they were comfortable with. So I think it was just a conversation about what those boundaries were. And then there were a few moments in the show, of course, that we took off masks to drink water for the orange slices moment. And so those were definitely conversations that we had with the cast, and something that could change every night depending on what people were feeling.
And the only reason I didn't speak up immediately is because my character just doesn't really talk much. So I wanted to give the other actors some, space to speak on that. But I think, Bethany, you might find this interesting, is that if you speak in higher in your register, you don't really get past the mask as much. So a couple of us did have to drop our voices down, because like that increases the resonance, I guess, like bounces off your bones better. So I thought that was really interesting, is like when we went down a little lower, it was a lot easier to hear. But for me personally, mask wasn't too much of an issue.
We definitely, I've been performing and singing and whatever in all sorts of different masks since, oh gosh, last October, somewhere around there. So it was just kind of a part of my life when we were rehearsing and doing this show, but I'd never been not mic'd before. So that was definitely, we like considered micing us, but decided that the way that the script is written, it's meant to let the audience selectively listen to what they need to listen to, or depending on where they are in the audience, like hear different things. And we thought that was really important to the show. So we decided to not be mic'd. And so we had to get some notes about that from David and Sage about projecting and enunciating certain things. But other than just kind of learning how to enunciate indoors and project in a mask, I didn't have many challenges with it.
I'm the same thing as Clarissa. Like there was no challenges other than being really sweaty. That was a hard thing. I had to change my mask multiple times throughout the show whenever I had a break because it was just drenched in sweat or it smelled like oranges, which wasn't a bad smell, but it was a little sticky. But yeah, it definitely wasn't a problem. It was a little harder to like get used to really enunciating, and because sometimes I felt like my lips would just die and like they would get lazy. So it was definitely a challenge, but it was a good challenge because I'm sure we're going to be living like this for a while.
What's there in this, kind of adding on to Bethany's, I'm curious about whether or not your process as an actor changed at all to communicate the emotion of the characters, without the use of that bottom half of your face. Because sometimes, at least speaking from personal experience, I've had some times where I have been misunderstood in the facial expressions that I'm attempting without the bottom half of my mouth or bottom half of my face for context. Was your process different at all to physicalize your characters?
I would say definitely. But I think it was actually the perfect challenge. I hope you guys can hear me because it forced me to be better about my physicality and connecting the body to the words and to the feelings of the character, which this show in general, you have to be very physically like expressive in general. I mean, 16-year-old girls, they're like moving around and doing, something all the time. And so I feel like because most of the information we get from when you're saying something would be from the face normally, but body language is just as important. So I feel like I really had to, my cat is meowing. I really had to figure out how to connect my body to the text, and that was something that was a challenge to me for a long time in acting in general, is really like getting comfortable in my own like full body rather than depending on my facial expressions or my vocalizations too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, ditto. There's a lot that's dependent on your body language. That's all.
Well, I have a question. I love the show. I love the play. I'm curious to know a little more about your process, how you really became so successful in building a soccer team in a matter of a month. So if you can talk a little bit about games that you played or any other activities that you engaged in, just to share your process a little bit. Thank you.
Well, we had an amazing soccer consultant, Giuseppe, who whipped us into shape from day 2, I think it was. We did a read-through on the first rehearsal, and then every day for about 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of rehearsal, the first half of rehearsal was all soccer practice. So we jogged like a mile, we did stretches, and through that process developed our stretching routine. We started with static stretches, then we did ballistic stretches, the moving dynamic stretches, and then we did work with the learning how to kick around the ball. And he took us around to do extra exercises with that. During the later part of that process, taught everyone specific things to our characters. So learning the spider web for 00, learning how to shoot the ball. For my character, we initially started with juggling, but then decided to take it in a different direction. So through having to really use our bodies every day, I think we really became a team and developed that kind of routine of like stretching and talking during stretching, and that just very easily translated to the stage.
We also had, Sage and David were a power team. Like that was insane that we got to work with 2 like such brilliant directors. And David threw out a lot of great advice. Like the show itself is really heavy, and I kept saying to him like, oh my god, like this is hard, to like sit through that monologue and stuff, and like come in with our own emotional burdens and whatnot. And he said, yeah, you can call the show heavy, but let the audience deal with that. Like that's not your burden anymore. And I just thought that was so cool. And then one more thing is that this cast hyped each other up so much. Like we were constantly backstage screaming, "Let's go!" Like just constantly like giving each other high fives, slapping each other on the back. Like this wasn't just a cast. Like we definitely are a team. It's not we were a team. We are a team.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. It's not even a question, but you mentioned Giuseppe, and I was thinking, Clarissa, your character who keeps referring to soccer as football, and for me, as someone who was raised in a different country, it was always football. Like soccer, I think I first heard that word when I came to the United States in my early 20s. So I totally relate to that. Not really confusion, but sort of cultural reference that you kept making, and then everyone else was making fun of you making that cultural reference.
It's just us in Canada that calls it soccer, and I don't know why.
No, Giuseppe was such a unique addition to the team, though, because originally we were like, oh, we want to get somebody from like the UCF women's soccer team, which would have been really cool, but it didn't work out with scheduling. And Giuseppe was perfect because he had the soccer experience, but also knows so much about theater. And so we were starting off with, okay, somebody who already knows what's going to look interesting to the audience. What are the specific things that we need to tell the actors, like, oh, this is from your dance training, but actually soccer players would do it this way. And so it was so useful to have somebody who had a mind in both worlds rather than just one.
Oh, and oftentimes after practice, he'd say like, what did we learn? What did we learn about acting through this? And what did we learn through soccer about this? And he would like constantly, he would always say like, at the end of every practice, like, how cool is it that we get to do this, that we get to take a piece from another world and incorporate it into ours through acting. And he would like help us relate the soccer practice to acting and acting to soccer practice. And it was just the coolest.
I also felt like there was, like, going back to the question from Julia, because all of that is so true. Giuseppe was absolutely amazing. And I didn't even think about that fact that he has a piece of both. Like, that made it absolutely perfect, probably better than it would have ended up if somebody else had done it. But going back to the question of how we became such a team, I want to go back to the script about that, because I realized, like, my character, for example, she's like super goofy and jokey, and I feel like you kind of have a piece of them throughout the whole process. You get used to being like them, and like you start to like, it starts to rub off on you. And so I feel like the relationships in the play just like almost bled out into the relationships with each other, or at least that comfortability that's written into it became what we all felt as well. Like it was like this just comfort after just going through the play just a couple times, and then all the soccer practice. It, like, I don't know, I feel like it was just a marriage of all of those things brought us all so close. Yeah.
I would also notice after every rehearsal that everyone would walk away talking a little bit like their characters. Like, Jessica would correct people with things, and Juniper started saying, "Oh my gosh," which we had a pretty strict check-in and check-out process to separate ourselves from the characters. But I think it just shows like how immersed we were in like the language and how natural it was that we all started talking like our characters.
That's fantastic. So to kind of move things towards the end, it sounds like this was a really, really unique experience for you all in this process. One thing that I would like to know, as an artist, I like to personally at the end of a project kind of center myself and say, all right, this is the thing that will stick with me because of this experience, because of the work that I did on this show. Do you have a favorite memory or a specific thing that you think will stick with you because of this project? And Sage and Gianna, if you wanted to pitch in on that as well, then you're both welcome to answer that question. But do you have anything that you are going to take with you?
My favorite memory throughout the entire process was our first Saturday rehearsal. our wonderful director, David, brought in oranges for us. And it was like a real moment of like, we can like translate what happened in that moment and put it on stage. And it was so fun. It was just, oh, I loved it.
I know it sounds cheesy, but one of the things I am going to take away is I've never felt such a part of a team and part of a cast, and I've never been able to lean on people the way that I got to do in this production. Of the pacing was dependent on every single one of us, and that like if everything in the show was dependent on absolutely everyone, and we were able to lean on each other. I'm going to take that away. One personal thing was I think the physical aspect of the show helped me a lot be more comfortable in my own skin, of like my body is exactly how it needs to be to do the task that I need to do. So it gave me a lot of confidence in being like, my body is strong and it's able to do soccer, and I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah, when you mentioned you had to run a mile, I thought I would have been out. I don't even remember the last time I ran a mile.
No, I agree, Clarissa. I think we kept saying throughout the process, this is an ensemble piece, this is an ensemble piece, but there really were so many voices contributing with Giuseppe in the room, and the designers during the tech process giving thoughts that affected then the staging of the piece. And then the players who, the real soccer players that we had within the cast that were able to help each other out too. And with Emmitt and Peyton finalized the stretching sequence that then we saw on stage. So it was just really cool to have that leadership spread around so much.
I'm going to take away from this production a lot of pride in the entire cast, because I have not been in or worked on a production in so long. So helping the Wolves out from the very beginning, from seeing everyone in callbacks to seeing everyone on stage Saturday, which actually got me so emotional in watching the show. And I was like, I didn't even think I'd be this moved, considering I've seen it I've seen it done in rehearsal a few times. And I just love seeing the progression of everyone from the very beginning to the end. And I think that is one of the highlights of theater in general for me. And it was an amazing experience for this show.
That question is so hard because there is just so much that was absolutely amazing about this experience for me. Like everything that everyone has said is like part of it. So now I'm going to think about that for like the rest of the day. Like, what if I had to narrow it down to one thing? Because I feel like there's so many different aspects that I'm going to be holding on to, that just like made it all just so wonderful. But I would say, like, if I had to choose like right now on the spot, it would definitely be the ensemble. Like, just all of us coming together, like not just the actors, but like directors and the backstage and like dramaturge, everything. Like, it felt like a family, and it felt like really just like everyone was there with a purpose and for one another.
Very nice. Last comments? I think that was everybody. Okay, sorry. I thought I saw somebody lean, wanted to make sure. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much to all of you for your participation. And for those of you who have served both on our panel and in our audience today, we hope that you will all join us for First Date. First Date is a hilarious, quirky musical comedy that takes you on a journey set to relive all the angst, humiliation, and surprises of a first date. The pop rock score throws the audience headfirst into the ups and downs of a mismatched blind date when a cool, edgy 30-something woman and a tightly wound traditional guy embark on a comical, high-energy journey to find love in the city, running October 14th through the 24th here at Theatre UCF.